The M23 rebels' capture of extensive areas in the resource-rich eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo has renewed a humanitarian and diplomatic crisis, drawing in multiple neighboring nations. The DRC remains one of the most complex conflicts in Africa, with every effort to bring a lasting solution ending in sheer disappointment. The African Union's efforts here have focused on diplomatic engagements, giving its support to the Luanda process, which seeks dialogue between the DRC and neighboring Rwanda, who are accused of backing the M23 rebels, and the EAC-led Nairobi process, which seeks to diffuse tensions between the various warring parties in the eastern DRC. A glimmer of hope emerged when armed groups agreed to talks, but violence has persisted, fueled by interest in mineral resources and cross-border tensions.
It would be very difficult if there are vested interest among the four member states who are contributing to that summit, to be very honest in terms of providing solution to DRC. Because of that, it becomes like almost impossible to hatch peace in DRC.
Professor Onditi says the persistent violence in the DRC represents a failure of African leadership to address a crisis that undermines the very notion of African unity, independence and self-determination. He says ensuring prosperity, security and peace in Africa appears to be a tall order, with conflicts, violence and wars holding the continent back. Against this backdrop, Onditi argues that there is little the AU can do. Its peacekeeping missions involving African troops have proven to be relatively ineffective. SADC peacekeepers have been deployed in parts of eastern DRC, yet their mandate is limited to protecting civilians, not eradicating armed groups. From a legal perspective, international organizations like the African Union cannot simply bypass the sovereignty of member states in order to intervene or resolve conflicts.
In all the conflict systems that we know on the continent, all the way from Sahel to Great Lake region in the Horn of Africa, across in the Central Africa, we are experiencing the unprecedented levels of conflict. And the challenge is we seem not to be developing mechanisms that would avert those conflicts.
In April 2023, Sudan plunged into a devastating conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. Recognizing the urgency, the AU launched diplomatic mediation efforts under the African Union Peace and Security Council. The AU facilitated multiple rounds of negotiations alongside the UN and the AU-affiliated Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or IGAD, a regional bloc of which Sudan is a member. While ceasefires were brokered, none have held. The AU-IGAD framework was to convince the two protagonists to come to the negotiation table. That is yet to happen. Why is that? Little will from the warring factions to end the conflict, external influences prolonging the war, but also a general lack of confidence in the parties driving the reconciliation efforts.
The military leaders, they seem not to be having a lot of trust in people who are leading the mediation or the dialogue. And in conflict resolution, the moment parties lose interest, it becomes like, a gone case. It will go into circles, it becomes protracted, and that's where we are in terms of Sudan conflict. But are there windows of opportunities for Sudan to perhaps get a peaceful settlement of their conflict? If you ask me, yes.
Studies show there are armed conflicts in about 20 countries in Africa. Mozambique is another. The northern region of Cabo Delgado has seen a militia insurgency for some years now. Efforts to bring any resolution to the crisis have been limited. In the Sahel, AU peacekeeping missions have struggled against well-armed militia groups. The AU-backed G5 Sahel force, once a beacon of regional cooperation, has faced severe setbacks from funding shortages to political instability among member states. The military coalition was established by Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger to combat terrorism and other security threats in the Sahel region. South Sudan's fragile peace process is one area where the AU has made tangible progress. Through IGAD, warring factions agreed to power sharing, leading to a relative, if uneasy, stability. For Africa, peace remains elusive in many parts of the continent. But the AU says the push to find the right answers will continue. Enoxi Kolia, CGTN.